All right. Hello, everybody. Jason Reynolds here with Visions Realty and Investments. Welcome to the Real Estate Now podcast. Super excited today because we have Dawn Zukowski. She is an investor. She, I guess, was with Frontline Property Management originally, and then was referred over to us. And we are in the process of helping her sell her property. And through a chain of actions, we ended up helping her rehab the property. So was really excited because I wanted to have Dawn on to share with you guys from an investor's perspective in the current market, owning a property, what it's like selling now and what are factors that maybe she thought about, didn't think about, would do different or wouldn't do differently. So Dawn, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Jason. Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
You bet, you bet. Well, really to get started, I'm always curious how people get involved in investing in real estate. You don't live in Texas. I don't believe you're from Texas, are you?
No Texas accent here.
Okay. All right. So what's your history in terms of when you started investing to where you're at now?
Sure. Yeah, I'm from Connecticut, live in Connecticut, and I started investing up here back in the mid-90s. I was employed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, in the real estate division during the first banking crisis back in the, I believe it was late 80s, mid 90s. And there were quite a bit of investors getting really sweet deals on real estate that had been taken over by the FDIC. And I'm like, wow, let me check into that. So fast forward, I started investing in condos because I thought they were kind of an easy way to get into the market. So I ended up with a portfolio of probably about maybe 8 to 10 condos up here in the area back in the day. And so that's how I kind of got my footprint. The largest property I had with a business partner was a 9-unit mixed-use property, but the rest of them were either condos, 2 families, 4 families, residential.
Okay. Overall, good experience in terms of the time you've been investing? I mean, are you happy with it? And what's your kind of desire behind exiting now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the, of course, hindsight's 2020, and maybe somebody saw it coming, I didn't, but people might remember the market crash of 2009, 2010. I had held on to a lot of the portfolio and kind of, lack of better words, drove it over the cliff, rode it over the cliff during the market crash. So in hindsight, I would have sold the majority of those off and cashed out and would be able to make different investments. But instead, it took me a long time to recover from that. And hence that fast forwards to your original question, why I'm looking to sell the Dallas property now to help recoup some of those equity losses from that market crash from even 10 years ago.
Okay. So then when did you sell those other condos?
I've been staggering them for tax reasons and other reasons, like 1 a year. I've been kind of like just putting them on the market, selling them off. So fast forward to the Dallas property here, the tenant who had been there 4 or 5 years, her lease was actually up, and a couple reasons. Just looking at my personal portfolio, obviously COVID going on, not sure what was going on, even though it's a really strong market down in Dallas, which is a huge difference from New England. There's nothing going on up here. So you guys are definitely in the right spot for investing. The other thing, I wish I had bought more when I bought this, I think it was like 12 years ago. That was another mistake. If I had known what the appreciation was going to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I would have bought as many as I can get because it just really, no, I mean, the appreciation, we don't see that up here in New England. So it was a really nice offset to help me out with my other losses. So.
Do you remember your process and how you found this property and around what you bought it for?
How I actually found it, up here that we have REIA groups. I'm sure they're nationwide, CT REIA, and there was a lot of investment people back in the time that I was a member, and there was a lot of talk about, since there wasn't a lot going on in Connecticut, to look at markets that were up and coming, and so Dallas-Fort Worth was one that was brought up quite a bit. I hooked up with an investor who was doing the make-readies and selling them kind of retail. So basically the house was rehab, there was a tenant in place, and that's how I got introduced to Frontline Property, because they were the property management kind of already in place, ready to go. So it was like a package deal. So I took the jump into the Dallas market. Interesting, I tell a lot of people, they can't believe that I never physically saw this property. I never drove down down. I actually bought it, other than pictures, it was kind of sight
Right.
unseen. Went by the numbers, of course, and I did a Google view just to make sure there was actually a brick and mortar house there. But other than that, I've never actually been on the property, which is some investors find that a little unusual, but I guess.
Yeah, I would say it's half and half. It just depends on
Oh,
your style. Yeah, with my clients, it's not abnormal for me to hear that.
oh,
So,
interesting. Yeah.
but so over your period of ownership, this last tenant you had was there for quite a while. Have you just had a couple tenants since you owned it, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of turnover there. I think if I had to go back, I have to look at the records, maybe 4 or 5 tenants altogether. So it wasn't bad. It's always interesting though. I mean, depending on the tenant, there is a lot of wear and tear on the property, like any rental. So did have to put a little bit of money in throughout the life of this just for,
Right.
rehab and whatnot, or tenant turnover. However, unfortunately, this particular tenant was a little brutal on the property, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it took a little more. I think that went into my decision, which I think you're probably going to go into about rehabbing versus selling as is, based on the condition of the way the tenant left this house. It was just cost effective to weigh on the side of doing a full rehab versus trying to patch and paint. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So then part of your decision to sell was the appreciation in the market and just wanting to exit. So then when you and I met, part of our process is we run a cost benefit analysis, and we had a chance to look at comps. And then I essentially told you, I believe you could sell the property for this price as is. And at that moment, it was actually to the tenant, or, or if it was vacant, you could sell it as is for this, or if you put roughly X amount of dollars into it, you would be able to net this. So ultimately, obviously we tried, for those of you that are listening, we tried to go the tenant route, and most of the time that actually doesn't work based on my experience. But in this case, it also didn't work out. So in terms of you determining to go the route of doing a make ready versus not, what were the things that really just made you decide, yes, I want to pull the trigger? Was it just the money? Was it the timing?
Right. No, great questions. I mean, the timing wise, I would have rather have had sold sooner rather than later. But
Right.
I think based on what we're looking at, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, you do this every day as far as you're out there, feet on the ground, so to say. 15 years ago or so up here, it seems I could probably sell a property that needed some repair work for a discounted price. There would seem to be a market of people that weren't afraid to sweat equity and kind of go in for a discounted
Mm-hmm.
price and not willing, had no problem rolling their sleeves up and putting some work in. Finding now that not necessarily younger generation, but just the buyer market today, everybody wants move-in ready, and and they may be coming from a really nice, class A apartment where they have the granite, they have the stainless, so if they're going to buy a house, they either want a lateral or a step up in quality. So to kind of offer a property that's a fix up would either be only really attract an investor who would be offering 50, 60 cents on a dollar, just to find someone who wants to step in and do the work themselves. I just thought it would, and when you and I discussed it, it would probably linger on the market.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of, brought me back to, based on the condition the tenant left the house in, to just go through and make it nice, move in ready, and hopefully sell quickly.
Right. Right. And there were, for those of you that are listening, to give a quick synopsis, I mean, it was in pretty bad shape, and I might be able to link some before and after photos here so people can see. But even at that rate, I would say we left some items off, but part of that consulting back and forth is, what are those items? And I think you're spot on with buyers wanting to, stay lateral or move up. Because, like, for example, there's a fence in the backyard that if you had tons of money, it would be good to update it. Some of the windows have broken seals, but we're just constantly trying to review what's worth spending money on versus not, what we could address during a contract and could not. So now in terms of timing, this make ready, one thing we're running in here is it's taking a bit longer than usual because there's so many make readies going on. So, if you were to be giving advice to, say, an investor, what are some things that you feel maybe you would have done more quickly, or you maybe would do differently throughout this process that maybe would have expedited it or made different decisions? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One thing I do up here, and I didn't really have the foresight I don't know if it would have made a difference or not, is I run my leases usually annually, unless the tenant wants a term, spring to spring or early spring. So if that tenant moves out, or if I did want to sell, it gives me that couple month window to really get things going while we're still in that spring summer market.
Yeah.
I think what we did down there is we ran the lease. It just coincidentally ran into, later in the summer.
Hmm.
So it kind of pushed us back. So I mean, that'd be one thing. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know of a huge difference that would make. Other advice is to, yeah, I mean, keeping reserves on hand is always,
Yeah.
good thing to do. Easier said than done. In my particular case, I just ran into, a few bad investments back to back up here. So it left me a little strapped. So that's why people might be wondering, well, why can't you just put new windows in or fix the fence? There's a cost benefit to that. Is that something that you want to outlay or help? Is that something you could leave, like say, part of the negotiation? And how much do you put in to a rehab? Where do you draw the line? Because you could have a brand new house by the time you're all done, and it's like, which would be nice for the buyer, but yeah, as an investor, you really have to, look at your budget. So.
Yeah, and I think I can clarify that on that too, because, I would say even if you had money, even if an investor had money on hand, there's still some things that I would think in a perfect world, sure, I'd do this. But if I'm representing you and trying to determine, could you maybe negotiate something less during a contract that's not going to prevent a contract, then why not wait and do that, especially over items that either could be less or may have a buyer preference to where when you do it and it can't be changed, it's better to let a buyer make that decision potentially from their side. And, I think I agree with you on the leases being timed correctly, because we're finding out now, I think our original estimate for yours was trying to be done within around 21 days. But what's happened is, we had insurance involved with windows. And then when you're doing punch lists, part of that factor of having a finished product, I'm sure many of you that are listening have worked with contractors before. And I tend to be maybe more of a perfectionist than I need to be. But at the same time, I like it because we want to make sure everything is done before we hit the market. And so, like you said, it could take anywhere from 21 to maybe 45 days to do a thorough, good job to get it ready for the market. So, and now in terms of how you're hoping the experience to go, we're actually going on the market today, guys, tonight.
Woohoo!
Once Dawn decides the price. So, what are you looking for as you hit the market? What are you expecting?
Oh yeah, I want a full cash offer by tomorrow night. So. No, I mean, as far as expecting
Give
is,
you a check right now?
yeah, there you go. You want to buy it? You want to move in?
Yeah, it's
uh,
nice.
it is very nice. I'm very pleased with the way it came out. Actually, I saw some preliminary pictures and, before and after during the process, and the contractor actually did a very, very, very nice job. So very pleased. So my expectations as far as just to clarify, as far as timing or price wise, or what were you?
Yeah, I mean, what are your kind of hopes based on, you and I had talked about the market and
Yeah,
how,
yeah.
it still is. So, I mean, what are your kind of hopes for, as you wrap up this investment, how that looks for you, timing,
Yeah,
funds wise?
yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that the market still has that momentum that it had over, the last couple of months, the spring and summer. And I'm very grateful that, from what you've informed me, that COVID hasn't affected the market too much down there. So, that was a concern that it might affect the, the buyer market and the pricing. But, I'm hoping that, get something that's, close to asking offer with not too much time on the market, like anybody would want.
Right.
And this might sound a little corny, but I really want this to go to somebody who's going to, enjoy the house. It's a great house, and everybody put a lot of effort into the sale, and I want someone who's going to move in there and really, make it their home. It's a great lot, great house. So kind of, on all levels, from a financial timing and also from an energy level, we want that it would be a win-win. I know it sounds a little corny, but that's kind of how I do business. So yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Dawn, for joining us.
my
Appreciate it.
pleasure.
And for those of you that are watching, if you're listening, check in the show notes. At some point, we will post the before and after photos so you can get an idea. And then potentially, I'll talk with Dawn. We might find a way to actually kind of maybe give a breakdown of what the final cost ended up being on some items at some point. So an investor can maybe have a real view of what that might look like for a property like that. So again, Dawn, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.